Shabbat Shalom. Good morning, everyone. I am Rabbi Jenny Greenspan for Congregation Beth-El for our weekly Shabbat morning Torah Talk. This week we have a bit of a painful parsha, to be honest. It's a bit of a loss that we'll be talking about this morning. But I'll say welcome and Shabbat Shalom. We are in Parshat Hayyei Sarah, and this week we were once again able to make the PDF of the Torah portion available. So if you head to beeasy613.org and under the worship menu, and you'll find the Shabbat virtual resources. You can scroll down and select Etz Chaim if you'd like a PDF copy of our Torah portion from the Etz Chaim Chumash. If you have a physical copy of the Chumash, you may grab it as well, or you can follow along with us from any source that you are used to looking along on Torah verses with, any other Chumash or any website with it. Safari we used last week is also, of course, available at all times. Great site. So this morning we are looking at Parshat Hayyei Sarah, literally translating as the life of Sarah, and yet the Parsha, our Torah portion, opens with the loss of her. So we're going to look at that a little bit. But first, I'll offer our Shabbat greetings to those who are here so far. Shabbat Shalom and good morning to Phyllis Luger and to Jody Zucker. So good to see both of you each week, and so good to have any others joining us as well. So let's go ahead and begin with our Torah portion. Shabbat Shalom, Alan Hamburger as well. Good to see you. Looks like we have a small number of viewers this morning, which is fine. I hope we get many more joining either later while live or in a little while. I hope many are able to learn a little of this portion with me later on as well. Shabbat Shalom to Jim Hammonds. Glad everybody is here or will be here. So I'll say Shabbat Shalom. And if you have that Etz Chaim Chumash, either in PDF or in another form, Etz Chaim Chumash, either in PDF or physical form or any other Chumash form, I'm going to be starting with Genesis chapter 23, which is the very beginning of Parshat Hayyei Sarah, which is on page 127 of the Etz Chaim Chumash. And Shabbat Shalom and welcome to the Seagulls. I see you have the anniversary follower badge. So there's new badges on Facebook. So kind of fun to see how long you've been a part of our Facebook community here. Shabbat Shalom to Cheryl Toof and to Marty Lip as well. So let's begin. As I mentioned, this parsha is called Hayyei Sarah, or the life of Sarah, our matriarch. But we do experience the loss of her. And actually, in this Torah portion, we're going to look at both. We will lose both Sarah and Abraham, her husband, both of the first generations of our patriarchs and matriarchs. Here, Sarah at the beginning of the portion, and then Abraham toward the end of the portion. So we'll look at both in a moment, in little ways, because I think that the two together teach us something deep about how we mourn, about loss, about death, and about funerals. So let's begin together. Vayu Hayyei Sarah mea shna ve'esrim shana v'sheva shanim shnei Hayyei Sarah. V'tamot Sarah bekiryat Arba, hi Hebron, ve'eretz Canaan, vayavo Avraham lispod l'Sarah ve'livkota. Sarah's lifetime, the span of Sarah's life, came to 127 years. Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, now Hebron, in the land of Canaan, and Abraham proceeded to mourn for Sarah and to bewail her. You might notice if you look in the Hebrew, at least in the Etz Chaim Chumash, it may not be true in every form that you look at, but one of the letters in the last word of verse 2, livkota, the kaf, is shrunken. And in many Torah scrolls, it is indeed written a little bit smaller than the other letters around it, which begs the question of why and what is happening here. In the Talmud, in the Masechet Sanhedrin, we see that they pick up on the fact that Abraham seems to come to wherever it was that Sarah was, because we see that Sarah passed in Kiryat Arba or Hebron, and Abraham had just come in from the binding of Isaac that we read last week. So he was away a bit and came over to do that. And the Gemara says, come and hear a proof from the verse that says that Abraham came to eulogize and Sarah and to weep for her. Lispod l'Sarah v'livkota, indicating that Sarah's funeral was actually delayed a little bit. One of the things that many of us might know about traditional Jewish funerals is that we tend to do our burials much sooner than other cultures. That often our goal is to offer the final rest of the funeral to those we've lost as quickly as possible after the moment of death. And yet here in the Talmud, we have a suggestion that perhaps the very first loss of our people, our matriarch Sarah, we delayed the funeral at least a little bit so that Abraham could get there. If you say that the eulogy, because Abraham needed to get there to do the eulogy, and if you say that a eulogy is delivered due to the honor of the living, would they have unduly delayed Sarah, burying Sarah, for Abraham's sake? And so the Gemara, the Talmud, rejects that suggestion. It says that no, it wasn't that they needed the eulogy and they weren't delaying it for Abraham. It was satisfactory to Sarah herself that her funeral be delayed so that Abraham could be honored by eulogizing her. This intricate mixture in this verse that Abraham needed to be able to be there and that Sarah herself would have wanted him there. So that they delay the funeral slightly so that Abraham can be there, the closest loved one can be there. Suggests that who is a funeral for? Who is the opportunity to begin mourning for? It is to bury the person, but it is also largely to help that person begin to mourn. Abraham does both a eulogy and then we see the word livkota. He cries, he weeps over her. Some commentaries suggest that small kaf, that shrunken letter, some of them say it's because he's not quite sure what to feel. He almost worries because her death immediately follows the binding of Isaac, that he may have contributed to the time of her death by going forth with God's request for the binding of Isaac. I think it's about him being small, feeling small. In the moment of loss, we can tend to feel small. And when we cry, when we weep, that is when we most need empathy. We most need others around us and offering us comfort. We most need to know that others are there and to be reminded that our loss is real and that we are worthy of love as we move forward in trying to survive. So let's move forward to the second funeral in this week's Torah portion. This one will be the funeral of Abraham himself, which begins on Genesis chapter 25, verse 8, which in our Chumash will be on page 140. Total span of Abraham's life. And Abraham breathed his last, dying at a good ripe age, and contented. He was gathered to his kin. His sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah, in the field of Ephron, son of Zohar the Hittite, facing Mamre, the field that Abraham had bought from the Hittites, where Abraham was buried, and Sarah his wife. And after the death of Abraham, God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac settled near Be'er Lahai Roi. Here we see another instance of a funeral, and here we see, it might be surprising given that Ishmael had been sent out from the family in last week's Torah portion and potentially had never seen them again. We don't hear again from Ishmael. It seems that he is now back, that there is something about that moment of loss of his father that brings him back to reach out to his brother and to be near his brother. And so here we have again a funeral where the primary mourners are focused upon. Now the sons, Ishmael and Yitzchak, Isaac, and we have them together. We see them together. We see them reconcile, and we see them both participate in burying their father. And if you pick up on that very last verse I read, verse 11, that God came and blessed Abraham's son, Isaac. Our Talmud, again, this time in Masechet Sota, suggests that this is God fulfilling the mitzvah of comforting the mourner, and that by God doing that, we are told to do the same. And this comes from one of my favorite passages of Talmud, where we see 4 instances of God interacting with a human being so that we are reminded how to help one another. And it is suggested that the primary things that we should do for one another, to make sure that needs are met, that we clothe the naked, to visit those who are sick, and to comfort the mourner. And then the final one in my passage focuses instead on the death of Moses, but to bury the person that we've lost when we lose them. This Torah portion is full of loss, but it is also full of comfort. It is also full of people coming together. It is full of people building one another up, acknowledging loss, of brothers reuniting, of tears that may make one feel small but remind one of deep connection. It is a portion of remembering those whom we've loved and lost, and a portion of holding on to those who are still here and will help us remember them and hold on to them. So this week, as we read the losses of our first matriarch and our first patriarch, our first 2 ancestors, may we hold on to their memories. May we hold on to all of the memories of those that we have loved and that we have lost and held on to in our own hearts. May we reach out and comfort those in our own lives who need it. We've had a few losses, big losses in our community recently. May we reach out to those in our community who need to be held on to be allowed to eulogize, to cry, and to be together. May we all remember that empathy and that comfort and that community is the strongest way that we can help one another get through these moments of loss. I'll say Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for joining me. And let us hold on to one another and build one another up, comfort one another, and allow us to sit in our pain, but also to grow from it in community. So Shabbat Shalom. Thank you so much for joining me. I also have the Sclairs and Peter Meyer. Thank you for joining in. And Shabbat Shalom. I look forward to seeing you very soon.